Hey guys, I'm JAMR. I'm your TA, just in case you didn't know. I'm going to be talking about chapter 9.4 and 9.5 today, looking at free trade, some of the hindrances that can be brought up there, and the effects of globalization, beginning with 9.4. I'm going to share my screen. We're going to talk about how and why governments shape international trade. Here are the tools of international trade policy. You have tariffs, red tape, import quotas, exchange rate manipulation, and free trade. I'm going to talk about them all individually. A tariff, it's a tax, it's a big tax. You guys know what taxes are. This is just a tax on imported products. So in the realm of world trade, tariffs increase the trade cost of a good, and we're going to use supply and demand analysis to see the consequences of a tariff. This is the final graph that the book provides. I'm going to switch out of this right now and go to the better graph. Share to this one. So you start with just the normal import graph. This is imports that are allowed into the economy. So you're going to have the world price here without the tariff. You're going to have your domestic supply. You're going to have your domestic demand curves. And the price is set at $12. The world price is $12. Sticking with the classic example, shirts. You introduce a tariff. You say you introduce a tariff of $4. It's effectively going to increase the world price to $16. That's the same effect if you just increase to $16. Due to the higher price, domestic buyers will demand a lower quantity, and domestic sellers will supply a higher quantity. You're going to notice immediately that that increased world price is going to increase the amount producer surplus right here. It's going to decrease the amount of consumer surplus right here. And it's also going to introduce something new that we haven't dealt with before, something called government surplus. You notice how imports, when you just have the world price, when you first introduce them, they make up the gap. Now there's less of a gap to fill. The imports fill the gap that's equivalent to the space that the government surplus takes up. It's a decrease in consumer surplus, a smaller increase in consumer surplus, and government revenue, thereby decreasing the total economic surplus. It's always going to decrease the total economic surplus. Yeah, I think always. Yeah. And so it's focusing in on government surplus. You're going to delete essentially the D and the F triangles from this entire thing. Introducing E. The way that you do that, you take the horizontal line across with the new world price where it's going to intersect the domestic supply, domestic demand curves. You're going to bring it down to the old world price. Those two vertical lines right here and right here. And where they intersect that, you're going to stop in that new rectangle with the width of B and length of F is going to be the new surplus called government surplus. That's the amount of money that the government makes off of the tariff. Stop sharing, go back to this slideshow. So that is the effect of an import tariff. It's a big tax. It's just a tax on imported goods into a government. An important thing to note is that the tax isn't levied against the people who are exporting the good. So, for example, China won't be paying that directly because they're not the ones who are in the country that are being taxed. The tax is placed essentially against people who buy the good here in the United States. So now they're going to have to pay an extra $4 per shirt here. Tools of trade policy. 2, red tape is similar to a tariff in that it raises trade costs, but it doesn't raise government revenue. It has a similar effect of reducing the amount of shirts demanded in this example, but it doesn't give the government any of the tax revenue that it would incur if they should impose a tariff. A quota. A quota limits the quantity of goods that can be imported, and it has a market effect similar to a tariff, but also does not raise any government revenue. Current state of U.S. trade policy. It's largely embraces free trade, one of the freest markets in the world. The use of tariffs is much lower today than in the past. The book has noted that about 100 years ago, it was close to 29% in tariff on imported goods. And it still protects some industries, namely agriculture. The farmers' lobby is one of the biggest and is heavily subsidized in the United States. Comparing tariff rates, the United States is involved in many trade agreements, And most large economies have low tariff rates. We have a very low tariff rate. We are below the European Union. We are surplus of 1%, but under 2%. So we're doing pretty well. Review. The tools of trade policy, tariffs, red tape, and quotas are common tools of protection. Protection from what, you may ask? Protection from imports. And some people view them as being hurtful to the economy. Other people view them as being very helpful to the economy. There's just different points of view. The book goes into this in detail. It is left largely up to you to decide based off of the arguments there. But I'll leave that portion to you guys. I won't get into it here. Each reduces welfare, and the latter two do not raise government revenues. Tariffs are the only one that increase government revenues. Red tape and quotas do not. They do not increase government revenue. Tariffs in the United States and other large economies are low relative to past and to other smaller economies. Remember that? They're very low today compared to what they were 100 years ago, or even in a shorter span of time than that, even 50 years ago. Some industries are protected in the United States. Remember that? Farmers' lobby. Yeah, farmers' lobby, not the food lobby. Farmers' lobby is protecting the United States and subsidized. That concludes 9.4. If you guys have any questions, let me know. I'll be happy to answer them and go over it with you in the book. Until then, I will stop sharing and see you guys in class.